Okay, let's talk a little bit about the analytical. And again, this thing about a plan. What's our plan? So the logical we've explored, right? The logical plan is I want you to begin by front 2 pages, exam after exam after exam after exam, time limit, stay within that time limit. You do poorly, increase the time limit. If you do wonderfully well, you reduce the time limit. It's preparation, it's not studying, right? Finish with that, go to the next 2 pages, so it'll be page 3 and page 4 in terms of that logical reasoning section. Same bloody thing. Begin to be aware of what each issue requires, right? So we've been working on the flaw. We're going to run out of time, but I mean, we'll get some stuff done. The next rich area to turn to in logical reasoning or assumptions. So that's where, as you do flaws, I mean, you'll be doing these assignments. Assignments not the right word, but you'll be doing these sort of preparation exercises. But the real thing I want you to do, I mean, that gets you information about your plan. But in terms of preparing, it's slowing down. It's sure, do those exercises, but then when they're done, sit down, right, and reflect and say, okay, let me actually try to understand what the hell's going on here. So it is, to me, in teaching this stuff, well, I don't know that I teach, but in presenting this stuff, it does strike me more similar to philosophy in terms of how it needs to be approached, which actually law does. That's abstract. So, just briefly on assumption issues, they use the word assumption, so it's not difficult to issue spot, right? They're going to use the word either assume or assumption. And there are only 2 types of assumptions, and you're not tested on the difference. So really, for the purposes of assumptions, it doesn't really matter. It matters as conditions, necessary conditions and sufficient conditions. That really matters. Necessary assumptions and sufficient assumptions really don't matter. I mean, they're different, but they're not, you're never tested with a necessary and sufficient assumption appearing in the same argument, and then we're being required to distinguish it. So, but when you think of assumptions, say if you can just get this stuff in regular life, going back to that concept of, it's, if I say to you, if I say to you the Yankees are going to win tomorrow, and then I say to you the reason they're going to win tomorrow is because player X is going to hit a home run. And then tomorrow comes and player X doesn't hit a home run. Is it fair to say the Yankees could still win tomorrow?
Yes.
So would it be further fair to say you could defeat my reasoning, but it wouldn't defeat the conclusion I drew? Talk to me.
Yes.
Meaning you can be right for the wrong reason. I mean, that's like in regular language, that's what it is. Have you ever been right for the wrong reason, right? Yeah, you bet you have. So that's on the LSAT, but not in regular language, right? It's there as sort of this abstraction, but it's based on regular life. So that's what you need to get. Like if you can get that down, that you become accustomed to reading, right? And you get the difference between a person's reasoning and a person's conclusion. You get it, right? And then you vest in the reasoning. It's either adequate or it's not. If it's adequate, then fine, then the conclusion flows. If it's not adequate, then what you have identified is inadequate reasoning, not necessarily a false conclusion. Do you guys get that?
Yeah.
So just nail down it, because this is what we're tested on. Because it's these kind of like fine line distinctions, which, to me they're not fine line anymore because I'm so old and I've been doing this so long. But again, going to, proving something beyond a reasonable doubt, that's, an acquittal is not innocence. An acquittal is just, well, you didn't get beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't mean the person's innocent. The person may be innocent, but do you get that we're in the business of using language with great precision? And that's what they're testing, right? So when they use the word assumption, you actually need to understand what that is. And again, regular life to me seems the better place to kind of figure it out. But you're looking at an argument, and you're looking over here at the reasoning, and we can just build on that parallel We can just build on that parallel flaw that LaShawn had us do. Remember that was the one with the cake? And it was necessary to have a good cake, it's necessary to do something, I don't know what the hell it was, right?
Flour.
What was it?
Flour, remember, it was necessary.
Yeah, okay, right. And what I'm saying is, think of that, they could present you an argument like that, but ask you for assumptions, right? So if the conclusion is it's gonna be good cake, I mean, they would never do this because I don't know what the word good means, but if you're saying, that anytime you have necessary but not sufficient conditions in your reasoning, right? That we agreed that it was necessary to have flour to have a good cake, right? But if the person just stopped their argument there, said, well, it's necessary to have flour to have a good cake, I have flour, therefore I have a good cake. And you're required to identify an assumption, right? Then you have to cure that argument. So that would almost certainly be a necessary assumption. In other words, you get the role in, when you're required to identify assumptions, right? You're also required to validate the conclusion, whether it's a well-drawn conclusion or poorly drawn conclusion, it doesn't matter. You have to validate it. So do you validate it by adding any other necessary premise that's not in the argument? Talk to me. So whatever you want to imagine a good cake to be. I imagine a lot of people would say a good cake would take sugar. Maybe a lot of people would say a good cake would take milk or something. I don't make cakes. I don't bake. I cook. Do you get that anything that's missing that's necessary is assumed? You get it?
Yep.
So I don't think it's all that complicated. When the issue is identify assumption, they're screaming at you that the writer has written an incomplete argument, right? And what the writer has left out in the reasoning portion of it is left out necessary evidence, right? And the mere fact that you identified one piece of necessary evidence doesn't mean the conclusion is now valid, right? If the conclusion was good cake, and choice A was the author has assumed that you have access to a oven. Kind of seems like something you would need. I don't know how you make a cake without going to an oven, but again, I don't know. But they stipulate you would have to go to an oven. But do you get that if answer choice A was an oven was available, that would be the answer, but it doesn't necessarily mean you ended up with a good cake, because there may have been other things missing. Do you see it? Talk to me.
Yes.
So as you do assumptions, and you'll run into them, and again, this first 2-page thing is really valuable because most of the issues really are approachable. You know what I'm saying? So the really hard ones, for the most part, they're not in that garden. There are not a lot of them in that garden. So as you go through this, begin briefing assumption issues. You brief them the same way. Assumptions are the opposite of flaws. Flaws, you stop and you say, I'm here to explain why the conclusion cannot be the case. Assumptions, I'm here to explain why the conclusion must be the case. You see it. And it makes no difference how compelling that conclusion appears to you or how weak that conclusion appears to you, right? Assumptions I cure, flaws I identify defects. Yes?
Yes.
So begin doing that. Again, just look for the word in terms of necessary assumptions, which is what I was just talking about, which I think I brought up last week. They have the word depends, requires, or necessary. So you'll see the word assume or the word assumption, and it will be accompanied by the word depends, required, or necessary, or no word at all. It'll just say the argument assumes. So then think of those, right, and just work on those. Say, well, I just want to concentrate on necessary assumptions. Well, those are necessary assumptions, right? And more specifically, I want to concentrate on understanding conceptually. Yeah, like what I'm looking for is a necessary condition that wasn't in that argument and had to be in that argument. And of course, every necessary condition has to be there. And the absence of one necessary condition is fatal. So, like flaws, assumptions can only have one credited answer. So if A identifies an assumption and it's clear and convincing to you that just happened, what do? You pick A. You get it. You got to get over this. You don't have to. You're going to be a hell of a lot more effective if you can adopt this psychology of preparation is liberation. It really, truly is. It liberates you from stress, liberates you from overthinking, liberates you from indecision. And the difference is, I don't know, as I go through the people I know in my life, like if I go through my family tree, and it's a large tree, I cannot come up with one person who has the preparation gene as I understand it, other than me. So it's not, for whatever reason, it does not appear to be widely distributed. You know, which again is not to say those people aren't brighter than I am. They may be more financially successful. They may not, it's got nothing to do with that. They may be happier than I am. None of them could do what I do. And all I'm saying by that is, can you single focus over a sustained period of time as though it's life and death? And if you can, you're in the right profession. And if you can't, you'll be less effective than you otherwise would be. So again, if you do this, I'm quite confident that your score is going to go up. You don't do it, you don't do it. Okay.